Calliope's Tale by FalcomReynolds. Chapter 3. Mother of Pearl. They didn't know where to put her so she would be safe, so they kept her in the captain's cabin. She was small and scared and didn't like to be in the dark all the time. Ianthe and the captain stood and stared at it. "I don't know how to take care of this thing," she started.
"Neither do I," Micolo answered, shaking his head. "But we have to."
"We have to."
"Would a married feed like a human child?"
He raised one brow, glancing dubiously over at Ianthe.
"I would assume not."
The mermaid blinked at both of them in the low light, then yawned, showing sharp, thin teeth like slivers of oyster shell. The captain's eyes went wide.
"Oh, no,"
he said fervently. "Definitely not," Ianthe agreed.
"So, what does she eat?"
"I'm not certain. Fish? Mussels? Clams?"
"Mussels and clams would make sense," Micolo murmured, rubbing the side of his face. "Do we know of anyone who could tell us about Marids?"
Ianthe racked her brains, trying to come up with the answer. "I'm not certain," she said, "but Port Kanzaru lies due east. Perhaps we can check there for anyone who may know more?" Micolo paused, thinking.
"We can make it in a few days," he said. "Will it survive?"
"We'll see." Lang came up with the first breakthrough. Even though before they'd even left the cove, a few days after the fight, he dove under the ship and pried off a patch of mussels that had suckered themselves onto the old wood, bringing them aboard to dump into a barrel of seawater. "If she eats anything, it'll be those," he said, wiping water out of his eyes. They were still red, but he was at least no longer blinded. "That or fish, but I'm willing to bet it's that. Crack it open and give it to her. Or just give it to her. Maybe she'll be able to open it herself." She helped drag the barrel over to the captain's quarters. They let him stay to see if it worked. After all, he'd gone through the trouble of going and getting them. Ianthe opened the lid of the chest and offered the mermaid a dark-shelled mussel from the cluster in the barrel. Her tiny hands grabbed onto it, and she looked it over curiously.
"Can she open that?"
Micolo asked, frowning. "We'll find out," Ianthe said, standing back. The mermaid scrabbled at the shell, but couldn't break it open. She stared at it, then looked up to Ianthe and held it out. "Ma!" she said, out loud, clearly distressed. Her gills flared in the air. Ianthe tamped down her panic for a second and took the mussel from the mermaid. "Just a minute," she said, looking over to Micolo and trying not to appear as terrified as she felt. "I'll get it, at least partway." She sat down next to the chest and pulled out her belt knife, jamming the tip in the seams between the shell halves. The mussel was doing a fine job of squeezing itself shut. She narrowed her eyes and worked the tip into the shell. As she wiggled the blade, she felt someone tugging at her hair and jumped. The mermaid was toying with the thick locks, patting them gently, pulling occasionally. Be careful," Ianthe said nervously, and looked back down to the mussel. The mermaid subsided. Micolo watched, eyes flicking from Ianthe to the mermaid and back again. She was gripping the edge of the chest, eyes just barely poking over the edge. With a crack, Ianthe managed to wedge the shell partially open, breaking part of the hinge. "Got it," she announced, and set the knife aside, handing the mussel to the mermaid. The mermaid immediately pulled the shell open and yanked the slimy shellfish out in one pudgy hand, then swallowed it whole. Ianthe stared. She'd never seen anyone eat a raw shellfish with the complete lack of hesitation this child possessed. Micolo said, off to the side. Lang, leaning on the barrel, grinned. "There aren't any other large clusters on the hull, but the next time we're near a rocky shore, I'll look for more of these."
"Maybe you'll find pearl oysters while you're at it," Micolo joked.
"Oh, maybe. Lang straightened up. What to find? All right, get out of here, Ianthe ordered him, rolling her eyes. You're dripping. Oh! Lang darted out of the room, trailing seawater. Ianthe sighed and stepped over to put the lid on the barrel. The mermaid surfaced again, pulling herself half out of the water. "Ma!" she called, frowning. "Yeah." Ianthe froze and looked over to Mikolo. Your turn, she said. He sighed and moved over to the chest. What is it? He asked the tiny mermaid, kneeling down. She waved her hands at Ianthe. "Ma," she said again. But... Mikolo pulled his head back, eyebrows raised, and blinked several times. Well, I don't know what that means, he said. But maybe she wants another one. Ianthe let out a breath. That was an easy enough problem to fix. She rolled up her sleeve and plunged one hand into the barrel of seawater, fishing around until she felt another mussel, which she wiggled out of its cluster and pulled free of the water. Its shell gleamed in the low light. We'll need to get more light in here eventually, she said, shaking her head as she brought the mussel over. She's used to the cove, and it's too dark here. But look at those eyes, Mikolo countered, as he took the mussel from Ianthe and began to pry it open with his knife. Look how big they are. Yes? She could probably see in the dark. And she must, to be able to see in the deep ocean. Or at least the parts of it where there aren't any light at all. She's never been to the deep ocean. Yes, but they go there when they're, larger. He gestured vaguely with both hands. Ianthe pursed her lips, thinking about this. I suppose, she said finally. Mikolo handed the mussel over, and the mermaid took it, delighted, and ripped it open just as forcefully as the last one. She slurped down the mollusk inside and disappeared, putting the shell somewhere in the chest. We're going to have to clean that chest constantly, Ianthe realized. When I nominate you for the task. As if, Mikolo glared at her. Absolutely not. I don't need to do that. She's in your quarters. And I'll get someone to clean my quarters. Ianthe grinned at him. They managed to keep the mermaid fed on mussels for the few days it took them to sail to Kanzaru. When they docked, Ianthe went in search for someone who would know about Marids. It was too suspicious for Captain Mikolo to go. He was rather distinctive with his pale skin and red hair, and he was easy to track. Ianthe could blend into a crowd and disappear. Marids had a strange place in the hearts of sailors. They were both holy to the sea gods and terrible to sailors, being strange beasts of the ocean. They attacked ships, drowned sailors, killed selectively with some process that only they knew. Some said they were just as intelligent as humans. Some said they were mindless beasts. From the fact that the little one had been trying to speak, it seemed like the former might be the case, in which case not only did Ianthe desperately want an expert opinion, but she also felt even more wary about the battle that had put them all in this situation. They weren't like serpents, to be avoided or fought and killed if you got too close. They weren't like the strange fish, to be caught, or the blessed ones, to be thrown back at all costs. Marids carried an air of uncertainty about them, an air of mystery. It was going to be a little difficult to ask about them. Ianthe knew the sailors who knew about their little passengers wouldn't be fond of the idea, most likely. And the last thing she wanted was someone trying to steal the young Marid and kill her for the teeth or tail skin, which could fetch a pretty price in the right markets. Athu, she prayed, forgive us for our transgressions against you, and let me find someone who can help us undo the harm we've wrought. Ianthe slunk into one of the taverns and found the first local informant she could spot, a young, slightly grimy woman, slouched in the corner fiddling with a piece of fabric. Hello, Ianthe said quietly. The young woman looked up, dark brows knitted together, and surveyed Ianthe carefully. Hello, she said, voice hesitant, testing the waters. Do you happen to be familiar with the area? Of course she was. She was a local. The question was a formality. I do, the girl said, tipping her chin up. She searched Ianthe's face slowly, eyes flicking over her features. What do you need to know? I need someone who knows a great deal about marriage. Is there anyone like that around? The woman pondered this for a moment. Behind her lips, she ran her tongue over her teeth, thinking. Not thinking of whether she knows, thinking of whether she wants to tell me. Ababua Ose, she said finally, after a long moment. She's probably over at the Sings. What interest do you have in marriage? It's cursory, Ianthe said with a shrug. Where is Sings? Down the docks, 3 roads and a bit. Red banners. You'll see it. The girl's gaze roved down Ianthe's throat, then snapped back up to her face. Anything else you need? No, I don't believe so, Ianthe said, amused. Thanks. The girl shrugged, looking back to the cloth she'd been messing about with. It looked like it were maybe embroidered. Ianthe stood and fished a gold piece out of her pocket and left it on the table. The girl glanced up, but didn't reach out to take it yet. Good luck, Ianthe said, and hurried into the port again. Sings, down shore and further into the town a bit, was a nicer place than the quayside shack she'd stepped into. This place had a sign, and curtains of red cloth hanging from the ceiling. The lights were lower than she expected. It smelled like salt and incense. Ianthe glanced about. Ababuo Ose, she'd been told. Who was that? The patrons here were less drunk, more subdued, and a little fancier than the crowd Ianthe was used to. She stepped sideways out of the door and leaned against the wall, searching the crowd. A young man with an immaculately groomed black beard found her first. Looking for something in particular? He said. Ianthe recognized the gold emblem embroidered on the red sash he wore draped over one shoulder to be the same as that of the tavern. Someone, she corrected. He raised an eyebrow. Just anyone? He asked, tipping his head slightly to the side. Ianthe smiled gently. No, not like that, she said, shaking her head. Everyone seems to be very interested in me. I would be irritated if it weren't so funny. I need to ask someone a few questions. Not violently, I hope, he replied, eyeing Ianthe's sword. No, not at all. Good. Who are you looking for? Ababuo Ose. I was told she might be here. He nodded. She's this way, he said. No security. If you were coming to attack or kill her, she would know, he said, shrugging. And it doesn't matter anyways. Not to her. Curious, Ianthe followed him as he wound his way through the tavern, between tables and lamps and patrons, lounging against the wall in curtained booths or sitting along the bar. In a side room, she could hear laughter and voices. She poked her head through the doorway that the young man gestured to, and saw inside a group of people surrounding an elderly woman with golden spiked earrings and hair rolled into thick strands, colored with red clay. The woman glanced over, dark eyes piercing, and raised an eyebrow. Hello, she called, raising a hand off the bar in greeting. Come here. Ianthe obeyed, crossing the room. A red-robed courtesan moved out of her way, smiling to her as she went past. She sat herself on a stool. Ababuo? She asked. Ababuo nodded. I'm Ianthe Kande, she began. I have questions for you. Of course you do. What about? Her voice was low and raspy, scraped rough by salt and smoke. Ianthe glanced around at the assembled crowd. Ababuo sighed and raised her other hand, Rolling her eyes, immediately everyone backed off, retreating to the corners of the room and leaving her and Ianthe alone at the bar. "You're in want of secrecy," Abubu observed, and she looked more amused than anything. "What do you want to know that has you so riled up?" "I need to know about marriage," Ianthe said. Abubu's eyebrows raised, but only barely. She took a drink from the thick glass in front of her and swallowed, thinking. "Marriage," she finally said. "Why?" "It's not important." "You don't want anyone to hear? You're paranoid. Child, don't lie to me." "We have one on our ship." This time, Abubuo stopped, glass halfway to her lips. "Interesting," she finally said, searching Ianthe's face. "But if it were full grown, you would have more problems than questions." "Yes." "What did you do?" Ianthe took a breath, let it out, tried again. "We didn't know any better," she finally managed, rubbing the palm of one hand with the thumb of the other. She looked down. "She wouldn't leave the cove. It was a mermatron, but we didn't know. She attacked us, and we had to fight back. We're lucky we saw the chest. We have her child on our ship, and her mother is dead, and we don't know what to do." Abubuo set the glass down with a resonant thunk and thought for a moment. "What are you feeding her?" she said. "Oh, thank the goddesses. She knows things. She can help us. Mussels off the ship and shorelines, when we can. Is that enough?" "More will be needed, but for now it's all right. How large is she?" Ianthe gestured, imitating the size. "Small," she said. "Like a human child, a toddler at most." "Does she speak?" "No." "Then you have taken for yourself a great gift," Abubuo murmured. "One you must not squander. You took it. Don't make the cost of that worthless." "I understand," Ianthe said. "But how do we make sure she's safe?" "Keep her fed. Teach her your language." "They can speak our language?" Abubuo side-eyed her, raising one eyebrow. "They speak their own, don't they?" Ianthe was silent. "So the sailors, the ones who thought they were like us, they were right." "Teach her your language. Keep her fed. She will eat fish when she is large enough to swallow them, but for now mussels and clams will do. She will need a lot of food. You can chop up some fish, too, if you want. She'll like that. Don't worry about bones. She'll eat them just fine. When she's large enough, the gills will disappear. If you can, carry her with you to see the sunlight. When she is too large for the ship, you will have to keep her in the sea itself, and then you will be tested." Ianthe felt a stab of... Was that fear? "In the sea?" "Yes." "But..." Abubuo surveyed Ianthe's face for a moment. "It will be dangerous," she said. "If she does not like you enough, she will leave you, and it will all be for naught. If she hates you, she will return when she is large enough to destroy your ship. If she loves you, she will stay with you." "How large will she be when that happens?" Abubuo shrugged. "I don't know," she said. "I've never kept a mermaid before." Ianthe opened her mouth, then shut it again. She didn't like the word kept, as if the mermaid were some kind of pet. She was a child, and apparently an intelligent one who would grow to be more. "Keep her safe. People will not love her. She's frightening to them. She is the face of enemies they have fought. Guard her." "I will," Ianthe said, with so much vehemence that she startled herself. Abubuo smiled. "I can tell. What of your captain?" Ianthe considered Captain Makulo, sitting on the floor next to the chest, murmuring in response to the mermaid's senseless babbles. "He will also," she said, with a slight nod. "Good." Was there anything else she could ask? "What else do we need to know?"
She will sing, Ababuo said. She won't control it at first. You have to make yourselves listen to it when she's young, or you won't be able to stop when she's older.
Ianthe felt a shiver run through her body. She'd heard talk of sirens before, Merids with a gift of song, a powerful enough gift that it could enchant the crews of entire galleons and leave them drifting for days in a becalmed sea, or drive them to leap off the deck and be eaten alive.
How do we do that? Sit with her. Sing with her, if you can bear it.
No. Ianthe shook her head. She could not sing, least of all to match a siren.
I'll listen.
Good. Ababuo drained her glass and tilted her head to the side, thinking,
if you let her sing, she will be able to do incredible things. I've seen Merids tear the sky apart with their voices. I've seen them turn the path of a rogue wave or split the sea in two. Should you treat this child right, she may be your greatest ally.
Ianthe swallowed.
What have we gotten ourselves into? I understand, she said, though she didn't. What do you want as payment for this information?
Nothing, Ababuo said, smiling.
This is not something I need payment for.
She paused.
Well, perhaps another drink.
Done. Ianthe pulled the requisite gold from her pocket and waved to the bartender, who nodded and headed over. Ababuo nodded to her and waved her crowd back. Ianthe took the cue and slid off the bar stool, leaving the gold on the counter as she swept out of Sing's and headed back to the midnight sun.